everyone's like settled, comfortable, got what you need. Oh, look at that. A little space, right? Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this assembly. My name is John Newman, and I'm the head of artistic engagement at Koffler Arts, just across the hall. So, I don't know how many of you were here on Thursday for the opening of What If My Body is a Beacon to the World? I'll say a world premiere installation by Adam Wolfond and his collaborators here at this assembly. And of course, after today's program, the installation will be available. So if you haven't seen it yet, or if you want to revisit it, please do. But by way of introducing our panel today on neurodiversity and languaging, I'm just going to read everyone's bio so we know who we're hearing from, and then the conversation will ensue from there. So of course, starting with the man at the center of the action, man of autism, Adam Wolfond, is the youngest poet ever to appear in the American Academy of Poets Poem a Day series, author of 2 chapbooks for unrestricted editions, Open Book in Ways of Water, published by Punctum, 2023, and The Wanting Way, also 2023, which was the second book published in Milkweed's Multiverse series. Adam is a non-speaking autistic poet who collaborates with his mother, Estee Clark, a visual artist and academic. And together they co-founded and organized this assembly, an art space / project / collab driven by inventing with neurodiversity. It's obviously based here in Toronto. You can also find Adam's poetry was featured in the New York Times Magazine. Chris Martin is a tilted listening animal languaging. He's the author of May Tomorrow Be Awake, as well as 4 volumes of poetry. Most recently, Things to Do in Hell, published in 2020 by Coffee House Press. He is the connective hub at Unrestricted Interest, which is devoted to neurodivergent listening, learning, and languaging. And he's the editor of the Multiverse poetry series with Milkweed Editions. Currently lives in El Cerrito, California. We're so glad that he could join us here in Toronto. And Erin Manning is a professor at the Faculty of Fine Arts at Concordia University of Montreal. She's also the founder of Sense Lab, a laboratory that explores the intersections between art practice and philosophy through the matrix of the sensing body in movement. Recent art projects focused around the concept of minor gestures in relation to color and movement were shown at the Sydney and Moscow Biennials, Glass House in New York, the Vancouver Art Museum, the McCord Museum in Montreal, House of World Cultures in Berlin, and Galateca Gallery in Bucharest. Among her numerous publications, the most recent is 2020's 4 Pragmatics of the Useless from Duke University Press. I'm also just going to put in a little plug for all the wonderful promotion that has been built up behind this exhibition. An interview of Estee appeared in Neve magazine just this morning. CBC's Fresh Air featured an interview with Adam and Estee, and more is to come. And then, even though it seems a little premature, while I have your rapt attention, we have 2 more really amazing programs related to this installation. Coming up next Saturday, Estee and Adam will provide a gallery talk and poetry reading. So please don't miss that. It's next Saturday at 2 p.m. And then Friday, the 24th of January, the Friday just before this installation closes, at 3 p.m., what we're tentatively calling, I don't know that we're 100% there, but Loudmouths, a non-speaking rally featuring Adam and 2 additional non-speaking autistic creators, Massimo Bossi and William, I always get his last name wrong.
He calls himself Harry McKenzie.
Harry McKenzie, there you go. So I've taken enough time. I'm going to turn things over to our panelists. So much. Should I start? Say something?
Do I want to say something? First, I want to thank everybody that came today. This is an incredible turnout. My name is Estee. I'm collaborator here at Disassembly with Adam and other non-speaking autistic people. I've worked in the arts prior to going into getting my PhD in critical disability studies, where I intersect art and disability, and obviously neurodiversity, and we work with many other non-speakers here with it, and I've worked with them for the past 22 years. So I
think
don't
we're
really
just
have an
gonna
order,
start.
so I think we're going to start.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
May I just interject with that?
yes.
We really like this to be a rally. Oh, Massimo is here, by the way. Massimo, can you just put on your hand? Or Massimo is going to be part of the non-speaking rally on the 24th. Thanks for coming. Feel free to move around if you must. I know it's a very nice space. But we want this to be a rally, so if you have any questions in between, we would love to.
Oh, yeah, I just want to second the thanks to everyone for making this possible and everyone for being here. I love any opportunity to be at this assembly and to celebrate Adam's work and everyone else's work here. And also to be alongside Aaron is a real treat, so I'm very happy to be here. I'm just going to read a slightly expanded version of what is in the catalog here so that we can move quicker into the rally.
Chris, can you speak up a little bit?
Sure. In my desire to rally with Adam Wolfond and his relational art practices, I am beckoned over and over into wanting ways. I am beckoned by moments, atmospheres, movements, images, sounds, and of course, words. What beckons me buttresses me, supporting my own thoughts, which pace alongside Adam's. One word in particular has been luring me of late: ceaseless. No matter how many times it arrives, it always feels revelatory. He writes, bathing neurodiversity is a ceaseless condition, for the moving and seeing is having the erasure of dancing autistic people like me. In a normopathic world, we must bathe neurodiversity without cease, creating dance floors wherever there is risk of erasure. We dance because there is no end to dancing, despite what we are taught. We are poets because there is no end to poetry, despite what we are told. Only the active forgetting of a narrow regime can keep us from dancing our poems, which are our bodies, which remain open to the intertextual choreographies that surround us. But Adam wrote about bathing neurodiversity. What of this beckoning to bathe? He writes, I bathe in a not water, but thick mess of ceaseless meandering visuals that want my attention, and I have learned that I also need support for my goings and comings in the neurodiverse collage that is a city. Meanderings, inefficient transports through the urban collage leap visually at every turn. In this mess of not water, there are ceaseless messages beckoning our bathing relation. One, who is never only one, needs the support of others to find patterns of relation, to forge together maps that can adapt, that can conduct us onward. Adam writes, I am the conductor of dancing silence that is full of actual ceaseless flow of thoughts, and the movement is like a music of ways of silence. The forever bathing flow we find in the rally is a type of music that calls out for dancing. Even or especially in what others perceive as silence, there is a symphony awaiting its conductor, or a conductor assembling an already playing symphony around themselves like a map. We are conducive to the flow that flowers everywhere around us, like mushrooms hatching from silent mycelium. We bell and tilt and reach and stream, each of us teeming with waves. Adam writes, I am dancing my body to sound the things I become, rallying the ways of ceaseless thinking that I can feel. Can we open that door to thinking about sound? These are invitations to a ceaselessness shared. How will you dance your body to sound the things you become? How will you find the door flung wide open?
meditated a lot about how to approach this today. And in the end, I decided to do something a bit formal, because to get to where we are today took a world. Adam is the first non-speaking person in a university in Canada, and he's finishing an MA. And and you know, the university, you shouldn't understand by this that the university is open to this. It doesn't happen because there's benevolence at the level of a university. It happens because there's a rally. It happens because a lot of people show up today. It happens because for years and years and years we listen to each other and we work with each other. So what I wanted to do is honor that moment with a bit of philosophy. So feel free to dream of other things or think about something else. What I want to do is just give you a sense of where I think that Adam's thinking changes everything. So this is part of a longer piece, and the question that I'm asking in the longer piece is, what happens when we are no longer sure where consciousness is? Because the threat of Adam, your threat, Adam, is that you undermine the idea of how we know. And if we're no longer certain about how knowledge happens, all kinds of things are exposed. And we need to have then the conversation of that exposure, which is a conversation about whiteness, which is a conversation about neurotypicality, but also about what we understand value to be. So it's a little piece called Hears in Red, Sees in Wet. And if you're feeling stressed by philosophy, I'll send it to you. So feel free to think about your dinner or something. I'm going to start by quoting my favorite philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead. Consciousness presupposes experience and not experience consciousness. Consciousness is not the fullness of the world as felt. Quite the opposite. It is the subtraction, the elimination from the welter of all that hears in red and sees in wet. It is what underwrites, and now I'm going to quote by another autistic poet, DJ Savarese. So it is what underwrites, quote, senses that live alone like bachelors, like bitter slanted rhymes whose marriage is a sham. They greet the world the way accountants greet their books, end quote. Consciousness is the poor cousin of perception as yet unparsed, of the scintillations of the force of form. It is also the imposed denominator of intelligence categorized, of knowledge organized. In the array of an infraconscious sensing, a sensing that languages from the edges of experience parsed, where, I quote DJ again, the ear that hears the cardinal hears in red, the eye that spots the salmon sees in wet, DJ Savarese sighs. Quote, I tire of such a master, and yet my senses often fail to let me do the simplest things like walk outside. Invariably, the sun invades my ear and terrifies my feet, the angular assault of heaven's heavy metal chords I cannot hear to, cannot see to move. That's from Swoon. In the valuing per neoliberal stamina and capitalist fervor of all that can directly produce the surplus of a world extracted, autistic perception figures low on the totem pole. To see, feel the red wetness of the world, to catch in the gleaming the edge of worlds co-composing, to live, to quote DJ again, senses that always fall in love, senses that spin, swoon, lose themselves in one another's arms, end quote, is to sense the middling of worlds forming where potential is full of spin and where paths are still diverging, their detours as yet uncharted. It is also to be taught that your ways of knowing don't count. The quality of life living that is autistic perception all of us experience, but that finds its limit case in autistic experience. I have described autistic perception as the incapacity to begin with categorization, the feeling into the world before it chunks or categorizes, threatens to crumble the belief in the mastery of form as final say. Consciousness as the highest order, as the marching order of attention and organization, holds it at bay. But what if there were no such overarching modality, no compass for experience formally oriented, no cut and dry map to segregate the human from the animal, from the vegetal, and normopathy from neurodiversity? What if, to quote DJ again, the simplest things in his account were actually considered not at all simple, not at all predictable? What if form were always force, alive with tendency and opportunity momentarily stalled? What if the teeming of the atmospheres in Adam Wolfond's vocabulary, the intensity of all relational pacings and overlap, were actually how the world pushed itself into feltness, into the uneasy knowing? What would that do to the value of the segregation of thought and act, of object and process? So what Whitehead does in his work is that he shows us that consciousness is not the fullness of experience. Consciousness is that tip. If you think about the fullness of language before you can articulate it, and then what comes out. And you know that what's come out isn't the fullness. It's how the coming out can express. There's something wrong with that. But that fullness is lost in consciousness, right? So the issue becomes, what is at stake in this belief that consciousness is the marker that gives value to the world? Because we believe that. That's what allows us to destroy the environment. That's what allows us to ascribe intelligence to certain people and not to other people. That's what allows us to be certain that certain forms of life are not livable, not worth living, not worth encountering. When DJ Savary speaks of the ear that hears the cardinal in red and the eye that salmons wetly, he is not speaking in metaphors. That is, he is not signaling a representational distance between what is and what appears as thought. He is speaking into the infrathin level of feeling that I'm calling autistic perception, touching the world in the making. He feels redly. Adam Wolfond has developed the concept of languaging to speak to that interval. Language in movement, felt form, refuses the segregation of that tip. It moves in the relation across and between and around any limited concept of signification. Language is, as Mel Baggs might say, beneath, in the pre-articulation of worlds tending, reaching. The world is less apex than swarm, tangle, mesh, tested always by the overvaluation of its syntactic expressions. Like DJ Savary's, Wolfond types to speak, and this typing, slowed by motor complexity, is a task that requires incredible body restraint. And I'm going to quote you now, Adam. If to walk outside is a challenge, remember DJ's words, I'll quote them here again, and yet my senses often fail to let me do the simplest things like walk outside. Invariably, the sun invades my ear and terrifies my feet. Imagine the challenge of holding still while activating one body limb at a time, a finger hitting one single key. Nothing more complex than activation out of inactivation. Just think of how hard it is to get out of the couch when you've been watching TV for too long. So activation out of inactivation is an extraordinary feat of forcing an impulse while holding another one back. So if you think of everything that's teeming in autistic perception, and now you're being asked to choose one letter, followed by one letter. Imagine the challenge of that for all of us, but especially for Adam. We have many normopathic ways of articulating this challenge, from executive function to motor disturbance. But these are too imbricated, it seems to me, in that value-laden concept of consciousness that would have us cleanly segregate part worlds from worldings. So, why focus on the motor challenge? Because moving the word one slow letter at a time is a practice that speaks otherwise than with the mouth, other than the two typing hands or the fluid penned calligraphy. Every movement is reactivated from a complex of movement potentials moving in several directions at once. Right? So a body is always vibrating, it's always moving. And then you're asking that movement to pull out, to subtract one tendency and to quiet back all the other tendencies, right? So when Estée has her hand on Adam, what Estée is doing in the relational pacing is helping Adam collectively in the relation tend a one movement out of a million movements. At least that's what I've learned, Adam. To hone in on one arm moving toward one keyboard, toward one letter, is a feat. And so each word, each sentence matters in a way much more urgent than those that can be easily respoken, erased, contradicted. I have never heard you say a single superficial thing, Adam, and I think that's why. In the languaging, a new mode is born that glides with thought's thinking, the language urgent in its gallop. But what ends up on the page is never all there is. Language jumps into the interstices of what ineffably lurks in the betweens and beneath. In the stick, with the stick, where movement needs no such restraint. And this is what we hear, that layering of worlds still in the forming in languaging. It is the edge of what is still very much in movement, the carrying over of tendency and intensity. This is why it vibrates the way it does. Its metamorphic syntax, a gallop across planes of existence. And I'll quote you, Adam. The languaging perception is the movement that rhizomatic meanings condition that are a part of my languaging, which is a leaving of meaning. The ways I make man of autism in talking about languaging is through the movements and the rallies that are sensed in the way of feeling. And that means that making perceptions understood thinks and faces the walls people live with within a Saussurean question. So in the normative linguistic beliefs, Saussure thinks that the sign is doing the work of meaning, that is the pace that stops the actual movements of the rallying body. The ways that I think about language is through the making of it. Words are days and times and names and feelings that are cut. Please return to the calls of the atmospheres that want to write these ways of perspective. So I'm not going to say a lot more, Adam, but what I want to say, what I try to say in the much, much longer piece is that every time we try to reduce languaging to the words, every time we say, as we will today, Adam, do you want to talk with us? We're forgetting that this isn't the only way that the talking is happening, right? We're returning Adam to a model of consciousness in order to make those of us who come to language more easily comfortable in the belief that Adam is smart, right? And that's what I think the exhibition is challenging, Adam, that you're helping us come to a place where we can see that those atmospheres and the rallying of the atmospheres bring forth a languaging that doesn't have to find its place in words. Nothing wrong with words. Words are amazing and you're good at words. But that we should become more attuned to the ways in which languaging allows that all of that world under the tip of that iceberg to also be felt. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I'm going to get next, but I started writing and I thought, I've written enough for this exhibition and whatnot, and I wanted to speak to you, but I am going to quote Erin as well, because I feel that what is missing from some of the discourses that we've had are people not understanding the process itself, right? When we say techniques for neurodiversity, or how we're making with other non-speakers here at the studio, what are we really talking about? How does that work? And I first want to talk about, I'm gonna try and blend them together to your quote about distantism by John Lee Clark, who Erin is working with. He's a deaf-blind, now scholar, also at Concordia doing his PhD, correct? I'm going to quote this first, and I'll try to put it in a context that I think works for what I'm trying to say. So distantism, defined by Clark as the tendency to privilege mediation over direct perception, is what allows neurotypical worldview to dominate, what allows the body to be parsed from its environment, and what enables a worldview that deaf-blind experience, to speak of just one discounted form of experience, is no experience at all. Whether we are speaking of the necessity to frame our academic knowledge based on objective data, or whether as deaf-blind people, our engagement with the world is considered by others to be impossible without the mediation of a sighted intervener, or whether we are expected to diminish our experience of the world as autistics, limiting our sensory experiences in order to pass, or whether our Black, Brown, or Indigenous bodies are expected to be less threatening by moving to rhythms, including rhythms of thought, neurotypical, and the list goes on, we are engaging in distantism. For Clark, distantism promotes the impossibility of a deaf-blind feeling with the world. In this limit case of distantism, a lived experience of feeling felt is denied. Okay, I'm going to actually stop there, and I'm going to talk about the sort of conflation I want to make, hopefully not threatening it, of a permeable body, a body that doesn't feel its boundaries, which I talked about at the opening a little bit if you were there, and also the relation that is needed to work with non-speaking people like Adam, who has motor differences. We're really trying to stay away from, if you're hearing this, from clinical terms. And the reason I do that, and we do that, is because we've overheard them. They've been around for over 200 years. I want you to know that. And how is it that we're still rooted in that, and we have to challenge that way of thinking that's been around for far too long? And I could point historically to the moment, but I'm not. Too long. I'm not. Adam's just going to go get some food and come back, and then we'll have him do some words. So what we do here, and what we talk about relation, is understanding that permeable body, that body that doesn't have any boundaries, and have touch support and movement. So some of these drawings I put up here was the purposes of how I started to think about, before I learned Dulini, actually, these ones were the first, of how movement moved in the classroom, all right? So when you're in a special needs classroom, so Adam has been mostly excluded, right? The teacher stands in front of the class, teaching stuff at you, and you're expected to sit in those tables and comply, head straight forward, and listen, right? And that is the performance of a good student. And in this drawing over here, I showed sort of that anguish with the red and then Adam running out of the classroom, which a lot of autistic people will do. It's too difficult to attend in that way. And then in this, when we started doing our own sort of homeschooling model, we actually ended up looking like a musical note, but it was more circular. And I just started to like draw these really bothersome relations of team meetings with therapists and how it was so hierarchical and whatnot, and really ignoring this body that Adam had and trying to make it conform to neurotypicality, to normative moves, and how extremely painful that is for autistic people who proclaim it, and it was for Adam, and how we had to move in our own way. And that started to be an artistic, if you want to call it, approach to making and learning together, sitting together, reading books, having a rally going back and forth, allowing people to move, sitting on floors rather than at tables, allowing people to stim, to eat, and whatnot. Oh my God, we have service here. Anybody else have an order? We have a server.
You can pass it here, I'll hold
Okay,
this.
okay. So, the way we did this exhibition took 2 years, right? That doesn't, it takes a long time to rally. And so we do it from the bottom up. Like, how do you make tools accessible? You don't say, okay, now we're gonna make a film. And we're gonna make a film about perception. It doesn't work that way because we want to learn, and we're always like forging ahead and learning about how Adam's writing and what's that leading towards, and how are we gonna like dig it into that a little bit more. And then maybe we'll take a video, or we'll use a body cam, or and that leads to something. We ended up talking about that a little bit more. And so we have like 2 years of documented conversations about how this evolved over time. And some people who have seizures, who can't be here every week, and share with us. It's like not considered a failure. These are all considered contributions. But what does the school do? What does the university do? It evaluates you by your attendance, by your attention, by how you write efficiently, quickly, on a due date. And we just have to sort of forgo those boundaries. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I wanted to talk a lot about relation, because mothers are particularly problematized. And I'm hearing this a lot in the interviews, right? I wanted to talk a little bit about mothers and mothering. One of my colleagues wrote a book called Unmothering Autism, and I think I haven't read it yet. Meg, you're back there, it's Patty's work.
It's coming out any day now.
It's coming out any day now. Okay, it's called Unmothering Autism. But it has to do with the governmentality of mothers and how we are supposed to continue these therapeutic practices in our home. So literally the therapist is guiding us into like, you have to do this with your child, right? And it's becoming the expert in your home. And it's quite invasive from my personal experience. And if you're living in a world that's continually excluding disabled and autistic people, what the heck are you supposed to do? Subjugate people to the so-called experts, or start to really, do things the way that you can survive and do them? I mean, our lives have come to a couple of breaking points where people were saying, well, if you can't handle them, you have to call the police. I mean, what sort of options are those for people to call the police? So, when you start to bring back the calming supports and sort of rejigging and recalibrating, then you can get back to the creative part of the relationship. And then, as a parent, I'm sharing these methodologies, if you want to call them methods. They're sort of anti-methods, really, of relation. And in ABA practices, who's familiar with the term ABA in this room? Okay, some, not all. It stands for Applied Behavioral Therapy, and that is a therapy that was brought to Canada in the early 1990s from California, and it was created by Ivar Lovaas, and this is the same therapy that was done for homosexual boys in the 1970s called the Feminine Boy Project, and it was to teach homosexual boys to be compliant, to be normal, to not be homosexual. And this is exactly the same therapy that is used today for autistics. And some people will say, well, it's more positive, we have more positive approaches. However, Julia Gruson-Wood who's a scholar, did a really wonderful study with ABA therapists here in Canada, and she interviewed them. And a lot of them were complaining about the therapy not allowing people to develop any sort of relation with their client, okay? And so what happens is they're constantly rotating people in and out of that room, and with the purpose, they say, of making the autistic person independent. Right? So what happens? You don't trust anybody anymore. You're not having any sense of regularity. You're not having any sense of routine. And you're being treated, you know, despite those false smiles on the face, pretty cold. It's a pretty cold way to live your life. And this therapy is done until, you know, as a predecessor to inclusion. So autistic people like Adam are getting absolutely no access to real study and education. None whatsoever. And that's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy, and I'm really hoping for a mind shift within our communities to rethink this, to rethink about relation and how important that is, why mothers and some fathers are doing the work that they do in supporting and teaching and even supported typing to our children, now adults, into adulthood. So we do that here. We build the relation with people here. We tap into the feelings and what they want to create together. And we just hope that that continues. Having these creative spaces where people can come and go at their free will is really lovely. And we've adopted a lot of your style, Erin, as well, of the rally. I mean, you rally very well. And so we read the readings with others that you've shared with Adam and I, with our group as well. And Chris, you know, who's been a longtime mentor of Adam. You know, you have to find those mentors in the world who will help develop the work, you know, and if we could all be available in those forms to be creative. Oh, I'm a poet, I'm an artist, I'm a scholar, you know, let's do this work together. It could be very interesting. I wanted to address those two things because I feel like that's been really covering in terms of how we do things here, and the questioning about mother, you're in the way, mom. And I think too, Adam's getting to that age where I'm feeling that more intensely now, and knowing and grappling with how, you know, the support continues, you know, with all of those things in mind. So to that, I wanted to just open up the rally and the discussion among everybody.
Yeah, I would love to know, Adam, you want to open up the rally?
Yeah. Sorry, I got to chips away.
Chips.
Chips just means somebody's hungry. Okay.
Yes, I. Am. Thinking. About. The. Ways. I. Scantily. Dense. This. Men. Of. Autism. Dense. With. Needing. Support. And. The. Ways. Making. Happens. With. Many. makes me think about the meaning of life and the various ways that bring relation back into the work. Yes, I am thinking about the ways I scantily dance this man of autism dance with needing support and the ways making happens with many people who feel what I do and that makes me think about the meaning of life and the various ways that bring relation back into the work.
I'll read it again. Yes, I am thinking about the ways I scantily dance this man of autism dance with needing support, and the ways making happens with many people who feel what I do. And that makes me think about the meaning of life and the various ways that bring relation back into the world.
Adam, I often think about how your ways also activate others' ways. I wonder what you would have to say about that, because the relation is always moving. It's not just, the pacing isn't just coming from a stay to you, it's also moving from you to a stay and into the world. So I'm wondering how you think about that.
Yes, I think that my mom can feel the meanings I make. I am my body and this makes me think wanting support is needed as part of the discussion. Yes, I think that my mom can feel the meanings I make in my body, and this makes me think wanting support is needed as part of the discussion.
For those in the back, I think that my mom can feel the meanings I make in my body. And this makes me think wanting support is needed as part of the discussion. Yeah, it's part of the reason why we filmed on this side, for that when you enter into the gallery space, that there's a rhythm going on back here, and hopefully capturing some of the ticks and the movement languaging. And it's something that I'm always feeling back here, but you may not be realizing it over there.
I can say maybe a word about relational pacing, Adam. This is a concept that you've come up with. But I'll give you a little bit of background. I assume a lot of people here are familiar with what's happening here, facilitated, which is called facilitated communication. And for a long time, and I won't go into the history of the problems that have, been extremely tiresome for us all. There was the question of who's really doing the talking. I mean, I don't know how you could ask that question, but surely not every facilitator is a poet. I've never figured out where that self-importance comes in that makes facilitators believe they're that interesting. But in any case, what happened then over years is that many autistics started to talk about how we were getting it all wrong, that we were assigning this kind of line from facilitator to autistic as though it weren't moving always in this kind of wave. And one autistic, Lucy Blackman, she writes about this in a really interesting way that always makes me think of your relational pacing, Adam, so relational pacing became, I think, the vocabulary that you chose, Adam, away from the idea of facilitation, because it allows us to really think about the atmospheres that are being generated in the feeling, thinking, moving. One of the things that Lucy talks about is triangulation. So she talks about how the world is always triangulating. So if you're thinking about the complexity of experience, how is it going to happen that one thing stands out or one environment stands out? And the way that she talks about it is that these triangulations occur, but that the problem of neurotypicality is that we only see the bits on the edges of that triangle, but an autistic feels all the movement that triangulation proposes. And so she gives the example of McDonald's. It's a great moment where she says her facilitator would say to her, she might walk by McDonald's and say McDonald's, because most autistics can say some words. And then she says yes. And then her facilitator takes her into McDonald's, but she hates McDonald's because McDonald's is just part of the triangulation. So what her body does in the face of McDonald's is that it names McDonald's as the way that particular field of relation can generate. But the facilitator is so focused on the endpoint that she never gets to understand what else has grown out of that. And so that's how I think about the way that you both talk about relational pacing. So that's why I asked Adam that question, because I've seen Estee be as changed by Adam as Adam's been changed by Estee. And it truly is collaborative work. And we also know that in many cases of relational pacing or facilitation, it isn't just anybody who can do this, right? So we know of a lot of autistics, like I read DJ's poetry. DJ's dad, Ralph, cannot facilitate. This is common. It has nothing to do with his love or anything like that. It has to do with rhythms and how rhythms coincide, how those triangulations allow for that particular form of language to express itself. But I think if we don't focus on the words themselves, we see, but no, the relational pacing is happening. It's just not happening through words with this particular person, right? And so there's something about your relational pacing that allows the words to emerge. But in another context, from what I hear when you're in the water or in the ocean or together, that your relational pacing happens in a completely different way. And I think that's what we keep forgetting.
Very much. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I have, being so immersed in it, it's hard to pick out the strands that I want to communicate with everybody. And so thank you for that. And I think that's really key, that's like when I say it's mutual collaboration, it's through this feeling that we're so definitely like, I am not directing Adam to do this work, right? Everything's an invitation. When you're working with Chris, you you're in conversation with each other, and it's a rally, and the cue is really important. And that, in behaviorism, they'll call it prompt dependency. But I want to say that the cue and the prompt, these are really important ways to be able to activate movement in the world. So, where that's denigrated, I would like to say celebrate that. Like, the cue is important, and the rally, and the type of rally that you're inviting. Are you inviting something interesting? Do you want to speak more about the rally?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many valences to the rally, and especially to the way that you use it and have used it, Adam. And one of the kind of, in some ways, silly ones is that we think about sometimes as tennis. And the way in a rally, the purpose is to just keep hitting the ball back and forth to each other, right? But I think when we get together over Zoom, you will write something, and it's this beautiful ball of language, as you said, that gets thrown over the screen net to me, and then I have the opportunity to hit it back or toss it back, maybe with a little bit of spin, and then you pick it up. The energy from that creates a new momentum, and we go back and forth like that, and it's almost as if each foray towards each other creates new opportunities we could not have known about beforehand. And I think that's a really important aspect of the rally, is that you don't go into it trying to get an answer. You don't go into it saying, we're going to figure this out today. You go into it just ready to receive whatever's hit to you, and then keep it going and follow how the energy creates new opportunities.
Can I rally with that?
Yes, I think that the rally is the way of thinking that makes for a languaging party, and that makes for joyful feelings that are meaningful, want to ask people if they want to rally. Yes, I think that the rally is the way of thinking that makes for a languaging party, and that makes for joyful feelings that are meaningful. Want to ask people if they want to rally.
Yes, I think that the rally is the way of thinking that makes for a languaging party. and that makes for joyful feelings that are meaningful. Want to ask people if they want to rally. That's an invitation. Don't be shy. Great.
My question is not directly related to that. Adam, I'm looking at your very intriguing drawings.
Those are mine actually, with rallying with Adam.
Okay,
Yeah.
so rallying
Yeah.
with Adam. And is there, they go, at least the way they're shown on the wall, is they go from color to black and white. Is there a reason?
No. I'm sorry. No, except some of these are just like really early, like in 2016 when I was just doing actually my master's at that time before my PhD. And I was thinking about the team meetings that people had and just like icky feelings that I was having. Drawing them out made me, they released some of that energy. And then later on I started to then study with Fernandini, who we could talk about, but there was, you're better at this than I am, but yeah, there was an encampment in Savannah in the 1970s, and he was a very forward thinker at the time in France to let autistics move the way they moved, right? And there were neurotypicals and autistics in this encampment together. I guess it was in the summers, right?
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah. And there were some maps like drawn of the movement that, thank you, that I felt meaningful because it was sort of picking up what I was doing here. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And so when Adam has autistic catatonia, and that makes for times periodically in our lives when Adam can't move at all for 2 hours or so. And this one here was when this was very, very young. We just moved, and he was stuck in the bathtub for over 2 hours. And there was no amount of words or prodding that I could do. Go for it. He hasn't had lunch, so he's going to eat a lot. And it was that time when I discovered nothing is working. And so I got into the bathtub, and I moved a little bit to the side, and then he got out of the bathtub. And my movement precipitated his movement. There was no amount of words or prodding or even any, what do parents go through? Get out of the bathtub when I tell you to. All of that nonsense that I went through, I learned. And some of these were just the relation pacing that I'm thinking of together, side by side, and the affect that I feel when I'm supporting. And I would say that being attuned or trying to be attuned to what Adam was feeling in the room and how I could help support. And these are just movements trying to get out the door in the morning. And I learned that, circling around the table multiple times, I wouldn't get out the door. But if I changed my body position again, you could go out the door. So movement and position was really important. And that's why I thought of it.
And thank you both for sharing.
Massimo would like to say something.
Yes, please.
So Massimo said, I am an autistic individual, but I'm not an artist. I'm here to acknowledge Adam's poetic endeavor. I think that finding the right place for each of us is the most important thing. The story of each of us is different, same place, but different and lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really important, Massimo. Thank you. That every autistic person is different, right? Just like all of us. We're all different species of human. So we have to remember that when we're encountering. I can't support every autistic person. I've supported a few others in supported typing and whatnot, but I can't for everybody. Everybody's different.
Yeah, because Aaron said something, and I didn't know Ralph Severese couldn't facilitate for DJ. What is it, Adam, that you feel when Mom facilitates that you don't with me or other people?
Yes, I think that Mom
discover the delete button. Go for it.
Mom is making a lot in the ways other than talking and this makes it easier to think at meaningful autistic movement that needs buttressing and that makes the man know that there is time the way I need for faster typing. Yes, I think that mom is making a lot in the ways other than talking, and this makes it easier to think of meaningful autistic movement that needs buttressing, and that makes the man know that there is time the way I need for faster typing.
I think that mom is making a lot in the ways other than talking, and this makes it easier to think at meaningful autistic movement that needs buttressing, and that makes the man know that there is time the way I need for faster typing. And those are the movements, I guess, we're talking about in the relation that we're feeling, like the Wilter and feeling the moments, that every moment is different than I'm feeling here. It's not like a robotic movement.
When you facilitate other
People get to
when you facilitate other autistic people, is it as effective as it is with Adam? Like, is it a
it's not as effective.
vibration, so to speak, of
Yeah, I feel like I'm supporting. Isaac's not in the room, but it's a much different feel. He can't move his arm. I really have to hold him back, his arm, and I use a ton of strength because it's more reaching here, and I have to reset him back, and I have to feel where he's going. I'm not moving his arm forward.
Something interesting that happened in the early 2000s was that another autistic, Mel Bax, was studied at MIT in the MIT labs.
I was with her.
You were with her.
I was with her.
And Mel, so I have the story just from Mel, maybe you have, but what Mel told me about it was that Mel typed to communicate, and they kept telling the people who were studying them that they were focusing on the wrong part of their brain. And they wanted to study Mel's language, and so they were focusing on the language centers. And Mel kept saying to them, focus on the movement centers. That's where my language is. And I think that that's really, like, that's the core of what I hear you saying, Adam, is that as long as we understand languaging to produce words, we're going to have trouble facilitating. Right? So often, I don't know how you would feel about this, Adam. You'll tell me for sure. But when I talk to Adam on Zoom, I would say that 90% of the time we hardly talk at all. Because I'm so interested in the movement that I'll say, hey, Adam, we don't need words. I hear you. You're talking to me. This is fine. You know, you keep your words for the next person you need them for. Because I work with a lot of students who don't talk, who can talk. I mean, physically they can talk, but they struggle with another aspect of autism, which is called selective mutism, where the talking can't be generated just off the cuff. So I just want to close that, or sort of pair that with the question that you asked Adam of the rally. So, you know, probably we have people here who teach or who have taught or who've been parents. And one of the things you know is that people don't respond when you ask them a question. It's a really common thing, you know, if your kid comes home from camp and you say, how was camp? They just want to die, right? And so what you do is you start doing something else, and if it's important to you, they're going to start to talk, right? Like if you don't want to be disturbed, your child's going to start talking. There's a kind of energy that allows for the voice to come out. And I think of that as just being really amplified in autistic environments, so that I hear you saying, Adam, all the time, how can there be a languaging in this context where everybody's sitting? It's not surprising people aren't talking because everybody's stuck, right? And Adam is like sort of pulling language out of the stuckness, and it stays pulling language out of the stuckness, and I am doing it, and Chris. But if we could talk more about that, then I think we could rally more easily, is my feeling. And part of the challenge of that is that we tend to only value language if it starts from nothing. So like if you think about it, you enter into a room, you shut everybody up to begin. There's lots of language happening, but you chose that wasn't the language you wanted. You had to like shut up so that now we can say the language that we need to have. Or in the case of autistics, when they're testing autistics to be able to go into university, the only test that has value is independence. So none of the relational speakers are easy to test because they say, well, how do we know for sure that Este's hand behind Adam isn't like writing out all the letters that, but when it's Morse code, yeah. But what we're doing with that is reinforcing the idea that language comes from nothing, but it never came from nothing. It was always a rally, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that concept of authorship and independence, which really is at the forefront of the collaborative anti-methods we have here in the studio, right? It's like finding those ways. We cannot in this field keep producing work that was by so and so. Not that doesn't happen from time to time. We don't acknowledge people and the effort that they put in, but we really overvalue that. And so this piece that is a collaborative work, it did happen over time. It happened, Ellen standing in the back every week meeting with Adam and discussing. Kira somewhere in the room, there you are, discovering, well, let's try an endoscopic camera, and it ended up being a hit. You know, it's just all of these minds together working in the flow and in relation. I mean, that's really important. None of us are working here in a vacuum in our lives. What makes us think that we're masters and we're authors and we're aficionados? I can't even understand that. But we live in a culture that really has promoted that, and we all think that's necessary. We're all tested every single day to identify ourselves. Is that your work? And so on and so forth. So you know the drill. We've all been
So I have a question for Chris. I'm really curious about the multiverse series, and obviously But I wonder if you could speak to sort of the variety and range of those who have published as part of that series. You know, is it all poetry? Is there prose? And what various sort of like life circumstances?
Thank you. I'm very interested in the unexpected and generative solidarities that can be found among neurodiverse people, and the series was born out of the provocation of Adam's work and another writer named Hannah Emerson, another Toronto writer named Amanda Taylor, that the writing was just so irresistible and so visionary that it needed to find audiences in the world. And it was also a great opportunity to show not all non-speaking autistic people are the same. And in fact, you have these three brilliant writers who write in completely different ways. And like, for instance, Amanda considers all of her writing to be rap, even though it's put in the bookstore in the poetry section, and the book is mostly prose. When it comes to genre, it's very interesting because for me, poetry is actually like the largest literary art form in the way I feel it, rather than the smallest. It's like whatever is doing the really interesting work with language is poetry, and I don't worry so much what form it looks like. But other authors, like Jerome Ellis, is a stutterer, and their stutter is a constituent part of their writing practice. And when we recorded the audiobook for Jerome's brilliant book, Aster of Ceremonies, I had to be on the other side listening because the stutter presents itself in a more like vigorous way when there's a listener. So I listened to him or to them recording the entire thing, and then we took note of all what Jerome languages as a clearing, because he has a glottal block stutter. So it's instead of repeating a sound, there's this pause, a held silence, and so those held silences were actually built into both the book and the audiobook. And then the newest book is by Latif Asghaba, who is a poet from Brooklyn who has choreic cerebral palsy. And the particular like corporeal interruptions were posed by that kind of cerebral palsy. Latif wanted to write those into his poems. And so he wrote this book called The Choreic Period, where a period interrupts lines in these various strategic ways that are really interesting. I could go on and on, but one of the things that I love is to talk about how people often ask how I've helped writers like Adam navigate the publishing world. And really it's more like I'm helping Milkweed, which is an amazing publisher, navigate this amazing new literature. In Adam's case, to determine, we can just talk about the design very quickly, there was a lot of questions about how, Adam, you really wanted some marginalia, so some additional text that would be in the margins, but then Adam came up with an amazing idea that there should actually be a wanting way throughout the book. So there's a blue line that runs through the entire book and circles or highlights or does a close-up on particular words on most of the pages. But if a line is uninterrupted moving through the entire book, you can't have marginalia because it would interrupt it. So then, Adam, what you told the designer, this design fellow at the time, Tikwa Diker, who's brilliant, you told them, I would like you to pour a ponding marginalia at the bottom of the book. So not only are these things happening that really have never been done in a book of poetry before, especially, but Adam's so generous in knowing that Tikwa would know how to do that, right? Like no designer has ever been asked to pour a pawnee of language at the bottom of the book, but Adam knew that Tikwa could rally with that and could find a way to do it. And so that's what's so fun about these multiverse books.
How important it is to find people to create with and to be really open, because the possibilities are endless. Really, it's such a joy to do this kind of work. So you just have to find the people who will do it with you. So I just yes.
Oh yeah. I'm just going to be probably too distracted for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you. This is like so deeply resonant, especially in considering how in rallying, not just in conversation with people, but in conversation with also objects and other subjects, how like the edges can blur, or they're innately blurred in autistic perception and experience. That movement is where like the true relationality lives. It's not in the subject and object, but in the movement and the soup of it all. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit, and I could go on about that, but I'm gonna stop myself. I also feel very appreciative of the way that you vocalize and also verbalized and distilled in many different ways in movement and otherwise. The difficulty that comes with selecting like a distillation out of expanse, and I'm finding myself having trouble doing that right now in such an expansive rally. So thank you for that. But my question, I guess, is how you relate to the poetry and the artworks as a distillation. Or as an object also in relation, and what life that holds and how it further I guess creates you both as producers and also creates like further work. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, you basically speak for me right now. You said it all. That's exactly how it works. And some of these works came from the poetic works, right? And then as a collaborator, I would materialize them artistically. And then, Adam would get involved in the wrapping or the mark making, with whatever his body could do. They can't, motor differences result in different movements on the page. But for us, it's sort of a way of living together, right? It's a way of living that we found that works together, and it's led to this, I suppose you could say. Yeah. Do you want to say anything about that? No.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask,
Hi.
I wanted to ask a little bit in terms of rallying about how you feel, Adam, but also all of you, about the differences in what's afforded to us between reading the words and going to the gallery. So when I was in the gallery, I was just looking at what people were doing. I was very interested in that we walked in, most of us, I think, looked at the words on the wall.
Yeah.
But then I deliberately made myself and said, hey, I'm in the gallery, so why don't we move around? So I sat myself in the bean bags. I noticed some people were finding it difficult to get back up and want to help one to get back up. I also noticed people didn't walk into that part with the curtains so much. So I walked in between the curtains, but I like doing that kind of thing, just to see what it felt like. I also went to the wall with the video screens, and I like very much how there's all this projection around the video screens, like it leaked out of the frames, right? So I was looking at the words and I noticed that the words on the wall were, at first you say, oh, I'm reading the words on the wall. Now these characters like this. But really, of course, if you look at it, they're actually this. They're stencils,
Yeah.
right? There's videos behind them. So it's like this. Right? I want to talk to you through the stenciling. Now I'm going to ask, okay? The words, like the McDonald's story, right? One way to think about it is that words are, it's not like in poetry, we don't have to just pay attention to what the words say, we pay attention to what the words don't say, and the fields between the words. And the reader bounces around, bounces around by these McDonald's or words, explicit words, dictionary words, right? In between. And the beauty of the poetry is that it guides us through these fields of feeling in a way that feels wonderful to us. We walk out of it different than when we walk in. Now I ask you, your words are beautiful, amazing poetry, but you also chose to engage us in this fabric. How, when you watch us go through your exhibition, what was different in how we were guided through that landscape that was different than what you have done with your words?
Speak to that.
Yes. I wanted to think.
You need to reach.
Between the words to the meaning of pacing. That is my interest and you are right with the movement and the patterns that I feel and this makes for a man of autism. Perception of some of the affects that is want to make the people dance. Inside. Yes, I wanted to think between the words to the meaning of pacing that is my interest, and you are right with the movement and the patterns that I feel, and this makes for a man of autism perception of some of the affects that you're coming at me all the time, so I want to make the people dance inside.
Yes, I wanted to think between the words to the meaning of pacing. That is my interest. And you are right with the movement and the patterns that I feel. And this makes for a man of autism perception of some of the affects that are coming at me all the time. So I want to make people dance inside.
Is this a lot for Adam? Are you done, Adam? Are you?
No.
No?
Adam, I'd love to ask you a question. Now that this phase of your exploration is being shared with us, an audience, is there a special part of this work that you like to go that in your own dance, your body likes to be in the exhibition? Or does it mostly make you feel, I want to continue this exploration now?
Yes. Has. That. Artist. Way. Ever. Like. The. Water. Finished.
No, don't delete it.
Water.
Okay. Okay.
Assembling. A. Different. Feeling. That. Wants. To.
Go for it.
End. No. I. Want. To. Keep. Exploring. Yes, has that artist way ever like the water assembling a different feeling that wants to end? No, I want to keep exploring.
I'll read it. Yes, has that artist way ever like the water assembling a different feeling that wants to end? No, I want to keep exploring.
Good.
Any other rallies, questions for any of us?
Sure, I have a question and a rally. Thank you all for being here.
My question for you, Adam, is you've invited us to rally with you. How can we rally past this space here when we leave?
Yes. I think that
Only if you want to do that. So I think that, deleted you, okay.
dense is ideating
idea and then ing, so like as a verb, ideaing the
easy way.
okay, good. I'm getting tired. Easy way.
Feeling the pace of many things. So I want to say go for it. And pessimism aside to be open. Yes, I think that dance is ideating the easy way, feeling the pace of many things, so I want to say go for it, and pessimism aside to be open.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think that dance is ideaing the easy way, feeling the pace of many things. So I want to say go for it, and pessimism aside to be open.
Well, of course, our sincere thanks to Adam and Estee, Aaron and Chris for joining us, for rallying, for all of you for rallying with us. I'm so pleased that the installation, again, What If My Body's a Beacon to the World, remains open until 5:30 today. So it's just about 50 minutes. So if you have not gone in, please do. If you have, please revisit it, and then go out into the world and rally everyone you know.
And go for it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.